It has come to my attention that the corruption and tyranny that plagues us as Americans is more grand than we thought. Today, many people are aware of the group of people fraudulently parading around as government. Many people refer to them as the global elite, the cabal, or simply as the Illuminati. Regardless as to the name used to refer to this group of vile, sadistic, inhumane individuals, through asking one simple question, it can be proven that they have no right to govern the land. That question: who are the blacks? Through vocabulary, etymology, and history, it can be proven exactly who the blacks are, where they're from, and why this is significant. My name is Sean, and this is my research. So we're going to jump right in. We're going to start with slave. A slave, according to EddieOnline.com, is a person who is the chattel property of another. Originally, slave was slav. Regarding the Negro, the reference Slav was so used because of the many Slavs sold into slavery by conquering peoples. So who or what is a Slav? Well, a Slav is a member of a group of peoples in Central and Eastern Europe speaking Slavic languages. And here's the link to that information. And you can click these links. These are active links. You can click them and they will take you directly to where I'm getting this information from. Slav, a member of a group of peoples in Central and Eastern Europe speaking Slavic languages, from google.com. Now, so the slave, although has the name derived from Slav, is not the Slav. That's a group of Europeans. So when were the Slavs enslaved? Slavs were conquered and sold into slavery long before the so-called African Americans. The European Slavs around the 10th century and the African American slaves around the 17th century. And there's an article on themeltingpot.com, and that link also is an active link where you can scroll through and you can see the forgotten history of Slavic slavery. You can see it, Slav slavery. So that's where you get the term slave from. Painting of a Roman slave market, painting of soldiers with captured slaves. All these slaves are Europeans. And this is the 10th century or roundabout, whereas the African American didn't begin being referred to as a slave, or didn't become enslaved rather, until the 17th century, according to my research. Now, my conclusion, based on this research: slave, as applied to the so-called African American, is not a denotation. It is not original. It comes from Slav, which are Europeans who were sold into slavery long before blacks. Now, this is not a racist rant. I have a point. My point: whereas at least two slave groups existed, the Slavic and the Negro, the slave, the former, the Slav, kept some sense of their nationality, Slav or Slavic, while the latter, the slave or the Negro, rather than being referred to by nationality in the legal and historical record, and this is important, was referred to using a derivative of the former slave group's nationality, e.g. slave, from Slav. Why? So the Negro, the slave, isn't the Slav. I'm not going to say Slovakian, but I'm pretty sure that has something to do with it. But the Slav is the slave. The Negro is not a Slav, but yet he was given the name of the Slav, which is slave. So that's the case. Isn't the Negro in terms of nationality? Now I want to make a point. Regarding conquest, it has always been customary to enslave the conquered people in order to wipe away their memories via an engineered Dark Ages slavery over generations, thus completing the takeover. And this should be considered while contemplating the why from above. Why not refer to the slaves in the historical and legal record by their nationality? Why give them the name of the former Slavic people? Again, I ask, isn't the Negro in terms of nationality? Now we go back into my research. Grove's Dictionary, 1785, has under Negro a blackamoor. It also says that Negro was figuratively used for slave. So slave is a connotative reference to the Negro, but the Negro is also a connotative reference. It also says that it was connotatively, example given, not originally used for slaves. So the Negro isn't a slave, and the Negro also isn't a Negro. Slave and Negro were all connotative references to a people who the historical and legal record kept their national name out of and kept connotatively referring to this individual, otherwise known as the African American. So again, Gross's dictionary has under Negro a blackamoor. Note the constant connotative references such as blacks, Negroes, African Americans. Why not refer to us by our national name? Negro, a blackamoor. Eddie Online defines a blackamoor as a dark-skinned person. Here's the link for that information. You open the link, takes you directly to it. Eddie Online, blackamoor, a dark-skinned person. A Negro, according to EddieOnline.com, is a member of a black-skinned race of Africa used in reference to U.S. citizens of African descent. Also, according to Gross's dictionary from above, a Negro is a blackamoor. Now, Moor was synonymous with Negro during the Middle Ages, and Moorish means of or pertaining to Moors, and here are the links for that information. All active links you can click on take you directly to the information, and this is my research. I did do all of this research. So, now, conclusion, based on this set of research. If slave was used connotatively for Negro, which itself, Negro, was used connotatively for Moor, then blacks, Negroes, African Americans, etc. must be Moors or Moorish. Again, regarding conquest, it has always been customary to enslave the conquered people to wipe away their memories via an engineered dark ages, and this is slavery, over generations, thus completing the takeover. Now, let's go back into a little bit of research. Well, actually, let's back up a little bit. So we know that slave comes from Slav. So the Negro who was enslaved, you don't get the word slave from him. You get that from a different people, the Slavic people. So slave, a connotative reference to Negro. Negro, a connotative reference to blackamoor. Blackamoor, a dark-skinned person. Blackamoor, Negro, Negro, blackamoor, Moor, synonymous with Negro during the Middle Ages. It seems to me that Negro, connotative, I'm sorry, slave, connotative reference for Negro, Negro, connotative reference for Moor. So what is a Moor? Again, this is all verifiable research, and I have provided links to all of these pieces of information so you can research them and see it yourself. Let's check out a couple of proclamations issued from a couple of cities here in our country. One from the city of Memphis, one from Chicago. They both say the same thing. I provided links for them so you can look them up yourself, but let's look at the one from Memphis. Signed by Mayor A.C. Warden here in our city, Memphis. Proclamation. Whereas the Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites, Hamites, and Canaanites who were permitted by the old pharaohs of Kemet to traverse from East Africa, later formed themselves kingdoms extending from the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa, the Atlantic Islands, onto the present-day continental Americas. And whereas the indigenous Moorish people of the Americas, are now united in order to again link themselves with the family of nations, and whereas the Moorish Americans, being aboriginal to the territories of North, Central, and South Americas, aboriginal, indigenous, Moorish. That's very interesting. So we can track back through historical record, through vocabulary, etymology, and history. We can track back that slave did not refer directly to Negro. It was a connotative reference based from Slavic or European slavery. We also know that Negro is a connotative reference for a dark-skinned person or Moor. And we know that Moor was synonymous with Negro during the Middle Ages. And now we know who the Moors are, the native and indigenous people of the Americas. But they told us we came from Africa, yet I've just proven that we did not. Let's continue. Now, undoubtedly, you'll find that the honorary reek proclaimed in the proclamation for the city of Memphis was rescinded. But I'd like to stress that only the municipal event was rescinded. The proclamational truth of who the Moors are was never refuted or contested. The only thing that happened was the municipal honorary recognition of who the Moors are was rescinded. There was never a dispute made as far as who the Moors are. That stands as record. That stands as truth on record, I should say, excuse me. My conclusion: the Moors are among the aboriginal peoples of the Americas who were conquered Spanish Inquisition and sold into slavery, having an artificial Dark Ages slavery put upon them to facilitate the process of the Moor forgetting who he is and therefore not challenging the Europeans' illegal operation on the land that they have no claim to. I'll get into the operations of the resident alien on Moorish land in a later episode. So, if the so-called black, the Moor, is native, aboriginal, and indigenous to the land and therefore owns the land by right of inheritance, then by what right does the European occupier engage in commerce on the land, including taxing, imprisoning, and murdering a Moor? Refer to Willie Lynch, Jim Crow, Black Christian codes, etc. The answer: abdication on the part of the Moor, acquiescence on the part of the Moor, the accepting of a lesser status on the part of the Moor. The point is, the European is not to blame. It's our fault. We fell from our natural rhythm and simply got devoured. The Moor was lulled to sleep, and artificial Dark Ages was put upon him. This is better known as slavery. Moors were beat into submission, separated from their families, a loss of heritage and tradition, and made to be ignorant and dumb, couldn't learn to read, right, in order to kill the will of those who knew who they were, the heirs to the land of the Americas, and to facilitate the growth of an engineered ignorance while the rest of the world flourished, might I add, over generations. This created a new status for the Moor, the Negro, the colored, the African American, the black, all of which are nom de guerres, all of which removed the Moor from propria persona, meaning that he was no longer improper person in legal matters, and rendered the person who is claiming to be someone who is not, the Moor claiming to be black, African American, etc., non-descendable, meaning that what is ours, the Americas, by birthrights, as bequeathed us by our forefathers, our ancestors, and our unalienable rights. These things cannot be claimed by us for now. So, the proof that you accepting a lesser status means that your birthright can't be claimed by you is the Dred Scott case. This is one of the many pieces of proof in which a man tried to sue for his freedom. A black man. Opinion of the court. In the opinion of the court, the language used in the Declaration of Independence showed that neither the class of person who had been imported as slaves nor their descendants, whether they had become free or not, were then acknowledged as part of the people, as in we the people, nor intended to be included in the general words used in that memorable instrument. So because he was claiming to be an African American and was claiming that he was descendants of a people who had migrated or been brought over on slave ships or whatever have you may, then he wasn't included in we the people. But the fact is that African Americans are not from Africa. We were not imported into the country. African Americans are aboriginal and indigenous to the Americas and therefore are considered first and foremost of the class of persons who were then acknowledged as part of the people. Now here's my final conclusion. The blacks, the Negroes, the coloreds, and the African Americans are in reality the aboriginal and indigenous Moors, the true heirs to the land of the Americas by birthrights. The Moors cannot claim their inheritance, though, because they do not claim to be themselves. By European design, The Moor claims to be black, Negro, colored, and African American, thereby legally disqualifying them from receiving their inheritance, because claiming to be who you are not is viewed in law as incompetence. Thus, the Moor is demoted to the status of ward, requiring representation, and your European representative receives and profits from the Moor's inheritance/estate. Status seems to be the question. The legal status currently being claimed by the Moors, black, Negro, colored, African American, or whatever, is also the reason for the harsh mistreatment commonly viewed as racism. As long as the Moor refuses to claim his nationality, he will be treated as if he were subhuman, and his estate, the Americas from Alaska to the very bottom of South America, will be controlled by his enemy who oppresses him, and he will finance his own destruction. I'll leave you with a few moments from one of my recent songs, F-A-Y-N, and I call it F-A-Y-N because of the vulgar language in the actual title of the song, but hopefully you'll like it. Thank you. Also, there is remedy and recourse to the stuff that's happening where the Moors are concerned. There is a way to legally claim your nationality, and there is a way to legally receive the land that is yours or be compensated for it. As a matter of fact, according to the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Article 10, the indigenous peoples, and we now know that we, the Moors, are the indigenous peoples of the Americas. The indigenous people shall not be forcibly removed from their lands or territories. No relocation shall take place without the free, prior, and informed consent of the indigenous peoples concerned, and after agreement on just and fair compensation, and, where possible, with option of return. So if they're on your land, they got to get off your land. If they can't get off your land, they have to pay you for the land. This is the law. And this is the point. This is the point for putting us into slavery. This is the point for lying to us and telling us that we came from Africa, so that we won't know who we are, so that we won't know what is ours. Now you know.